be the representation you didn't have growing up,
Mm.
because there's nobody else who can represent you the way you can. So every single day, try to just practice being more you, whether that is checking in with yourself or validating yourself or redefining your success, whatever that is. But just every single day, take one more step towards being more you.
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface. Welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface. And today we are diving into a topic that I feel like I don't get the opportunity to talk a lot about, but business, entrepreneurship, and branding and all that fun stuff. So, Sucheta, thank you so much for joining me and being here. And I'm just really excited to kind of see where our conversation takes us and, just really unpacking how we can show up more of who we are, because I feel like that is where naturally all of us creatives are just wanting to be, is like our fullest expression of ourselves. So thanks so much for being here first and foremost.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for our chat, and I agree with you. I think so many of us are like looking to just be more ourselves, and I hope we can kind of dive into that today and hopefully motivate some people.
I feel like that will naturally happen. I'm curious to start. I just love to give you the space to share a little bit more about who it is that you are, and whatever feels true in this moment. Because I know sometimes that can be a loaded question, but as someone who knows branding, I feel like you've got like that down packed.
That's I've built this like pitch, this like 1 minute pitch, but I'm actually gonna go completely off script today,
Cool.
and say that I'm someone who's changing every single day. Some days I know who I am. Some days I'm like, who am I? Are people taking me seriously or not? So that happens to every single person, even people who are within the world of branding and helping people figure out like how to show up and how to talk about themselves. I
Mhm.
think that should be talked about a little bit more. But yeah, I am a brand designer. I support people in content creation, website design, and just helping them share their story in an authentic way, and not even an authentic way that's like what's going to look good, what's going to sound good. It's more of just what is the most true to themselves. That's where I kind of jump in and help people um, gain the clarity and just figure out like who they are and how they should be showing up, right? um,
Mhm.
More than that, I'm also the eldest daughter in an immigrant household, which is a big part of my identity. I take a lot of pride in that. I love my family. I love my sibling. I love my dogs. I'm a big dog person. And recently, I've just been really getting into gardening. So I've become a gardener this year.
Cool. I'm not gonna lie. I am totally not a gardener, but my fiance definitely is, and he is naturally finding his ways of in our little condo on our balcony to have a little garden. So I'm just like, just tell me what to do. Like, what do I do here? But you're taking care of these plants, please, these veggies. But I
That's
love
awesome.
that. Yeah. Oh my gosh. But I genuinely love the way that you started. And I feel like, I will say, as someone who is a host of a podcast and being able to have this opportunity to connect with so many different people, it kind of never ceases to amaze me in a sense that, how divinely guided we are in ways, because I will say too, like for myself, like that is the constant question that I am asking myself. Like, who am I? What am I here to do? And it's funny, it's like people sometimes see it more clearly than we can see it ourselves. And
Mhm.
one day there's so much clarity. And then the next day I'm like, wait, what happened? And who am I? Where am I? Like, so I think too, I just want to acknowledge, because I appreciate you saying that so much, because I feel like a lot of like brand strategists and people that are in that space don't really talk about that. Like I've never really heard someone talk about openly or just share that they also question it themselves. So I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm human. Like I'm okay. I don't have it all figured out. Like we're good. So I
No,
appreciate that.
yeah, thank you. And I mean, it's something that I'm also working on as well, right? Like, one of the things that I always try to tell my clients is I'm not someone who's made it, and I'm not someone who's this like super extraordinary person who's figured out life. I'm also
Yeah.
someone who's just learning. So, as transparent I can be about that, I've realized like people feel just like more relaxed. They feel like, okay, I can take it slow, I can take it easy, and it will still work out for me. So, thank you. I'm glad that like it kind of had that effect, but
Yeah.
it's still something I'm practicing too. Yeah.
I feel you. I feel you. Because I feel like there's this piece, right? It's like we have to have it all figured out and all together. And I think it's just leaning into this right now moment. And what's interesting is I've always kind of said, like, I think it's wild that, we're in high school and you're what, like 18 when you're being told, like, okay, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And that question felt so loaded. I don't know if it was just me or everyone around me, but I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Like I don't, that's such a loaded question. And I think it's just leaning into this piece around the right now. Like who are you right now? And also just being open and accepting that who you feel like you are right now in this moment could change a year from now, but it could also change like a month from now. It could be it's whatever that looks like, right? It's like whatever you're meant for that certain period of time. And I feel like it's like leaning into that accepting piece and embracing that we are just constantly evolving, constantly growing, and just letting that be okay too, to be able to change directions when we want to change direction. And I feel like that just feels really true as, being in the entrepreneurship space, right? Like we're constantly evolving, constantly, like probably who you serve right now, who knows, that might change in a year. That happened to me where it was just kind of like, I'm serving all these different types of people. And now very like this year, it's kind of like, oh, these are my people. These are the
Yeah.
people that I want to focus on. And it's fun, right? If you can embrace that piece of around it too.
That's
Yeah.
beautifully said, by the way, and completely agree. And I always say this too. I'm like, okay, like, and this is like a lot of conversations with my clients that I'm gonna be probably like bringing up. But recently it was, oh, like I've written this in my Instagram bio, so I feel like I shouldn't offer this service because I don't know, like, what if people think that like I'm not this person? And I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's just an Instagram bio, and you are more than an Instagram bio. You're more than the few keywords that are there, right? And it's
Mm.
okay if some people know you as something else than that. But it's just like something to practice and something to remind yourself of every time, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that boxing in, right? We've put so much pressure on the one liner, the Instagram bio, the whatever, right? Like we've put so much pressure on that, and also so much pressure on the labels that we're trying to like actively cling to. And I think it's because we're constantly being told that like you need to know and be able to clearly communicate who it is that you serve and what you do. And that's where that overwhelm comes from. And I'm curious too to kind of like, I guess in a way, like backtracking at the beginning part of your journey, like what led you even into entrepreneurship? Like, what was that like for you?
I it was on a whim, honestly. um, I was in my third year of university. I was studying kinesiology. I was like, okay, after my fourth year, like I'm gonna hopefully get into physio school, become a physiotherapist, and like I'm good. And third year of university, I just ended up applying to an accelerator program on a whim with a business idea that like I didn't really know was a business idea.
Love it.
And it ended up working out. It was me and my roommate. We were co-founders. We applied together and ended up getting in. We got funded $10,000 to just start this business that we had no idea how to run a business. Um, so it was, I think, a year of running that business that led me to realize like I love building businesses. I love communicating a business's values,
Mm,
and I just love connecting with people in like a different way because you actually get to see the impact you're making, right?
yeah.
So I started helping other business owner friends with their branding and websites and content, and then that's the rest is kind of history. Since then, I've just been
Yeah.
working on, yeah.
That's so fun. Isn't it so cool how it just kind of like naturally just like comes into your plate and then you just kind of start running with it and you're just like, I'm gonna give this a try. And I feel like sometimes it's like that not so seriousness piece of it too is like what makes it also a little fun too. But I'm curious, like as you kind of like even before you got into it or as you've gotten into it, was there any kind of fears that came up, any self doubt, limiting beliefs, like any of that that came through, and maybe that you still can't like work through as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think entrepreneurship is a constant journey of taking yourself seriously. So
Yeah, so
so that
true.
is like the number one thing. I think like of course growing a business like you need a lot of funding and you need a lot of time and effort and you're working like 80-hour weeks. So of course the hard work, like the physical hard work's there, but mentally it is very challenging and like I dealt with a lot of that because I actually grew up in India like the first 11 years of my life. So a lot of like the things that would come up, I realized were very um, hustle culture focused or wanting to be really successful focused. And I was like, okay, like I don't have to be this person who's a millionaire at 22. It's okay, right? Like there's a
Mm,
lot of self worth stuff attached to it as well that I had to work through. Like I mentioned, I'm the oldest daughter, so I've always been
yeah.
involved in family discussions, and I felt like again at 22, 21, that like I had to contribute and make sure everyone's taken care of, and a
Mm,
lot of that also made me feel really pressured to keep showing up and keep overworking and just do too much until I burnt out,
yeah.
which was nice. Like I learned a lot through that period, but I burnt out as well to the point where I had to take a couple of months off to just focus
Yeah.
on my own health because if my own cup isn't full, I cannot serve others at all, right? So
Mm,
I learned that the hard way, but um, just going through that process like taught me that I have a lot of things that I'm still working on in terms of my self-worth and who I want to be and how I show love and things like that as well. So
I love that. And isn't that like it's such a I don't know, like I feel like I've been kind of in this like building a business for like what feels like a decade now. And it's just like I don't know, like it's just such a journey that, people always say it's like, a whole personal development piece too that you embark on as you build a business. And what a gift I think it is, like to be in this space where you're just constantly challenging yourself and doing this dance with yourself where you're seeing the sides of you that maybe have been hidden or you've kind of suppressed and then you're like whoa okay and then
yeah.
you get to also like transform that and then you have these moments or these breakthroughs and ultimately it's a story to tell, right? It all becomes part of our journey and part of our story and also ways that we can use our literally use our voice or words to support other people that are in this a similar journey, right? Like us coming
Mhm.
together is like this beautiful conversation to be able to support those that are in this journey too, no matter how long you've been in the journey, no matter how new you're in the journey, like it's always going to be this beautiful evolution. And I think that's the part that excites me the most about like entrepreneurship and just building a business and building something that's my own. is that, like it's just that, like, I don't know why the word like grit is coming up, but it just feels like it feels so exciting to be on this journey. Like, I don't know if you ever kind of like sit with that. And it's like, yeah, sometimes it's hard, but honestly, like, I don't think I would ever trade it for anything. Like, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is something I'm actually coming to now after 3.5 years of entrepreneurship. I think for especially like initially, I was really focused on just success and making it and the metrics and a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff I had to overcome, which I'm glad I did because now I'm able to again have
Yeah.
that impact on other people and support them and make sure they don't take a similar path. So, in a way, I'm really grateful for that. But I don't think I would have had that same realization initially when I started. But like looking back now, I don't think I would trade it for anything. And it's been something that is like priceless. Like, I know a lot of people say, oh, when you launch a business, you should always have an exit strategy. You should grow it to a point where you can sell it. And that's amazing. But it's like, I don't think I'd ever want to sell any of my businesses because like
Yeah.
it's priceless. Like what it gave me is I can't put a price on it, right? So
Yeah.
I completely agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never thought of an exit strategy. I'm just like, nah, like I'm just like, all right, I know I'm gonna evolve and I know I'm just gonna continue to pivot, but I know that I'm always gonna be in this space, but like I can't ever foresee some kind of exit strategy. But I also think that it's an important conversation to have in the sense of, success is such a big part of this piece around entrepreneurship, right? Like this, and sometimes I feel like a lot of people when they hear the word success they're thinking immediately like money and dollars. And I think it's a really important conversation to have because it's always like the more, and I feel like that's like such a big piece around this hustle culture is more, and just constantly working. And honestly, I feel like that's where we truly have things backwards because it's you have to enjoy now because ultimately all we have right now. You only have this present moment. And so
Mhm.
sometimes I think this what happens to me, and to be honest, I think this is what was happening to me on my walk this morning. It was just like, if this is how my life was, right, for the rest of my life, would I be happy? And I'm coming to a place where I'm like, yeah, I would genuinely be happy. And I feel like that has to be, I don't want to say have to or should be, but it's just like being content and happy and joyful in right now, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But, it's just like the place that you live, right? Like, I think it's what it comes down to is we're always kind of searching for the next thing or for the change or for the next level. And we're forgetting to be in the present moment with where you're currently at, whether that be your business, whether that be you growing your business alongside working a full-time job like myself. It's like, and looking at where you live, it's like, okay, what if I never move and I'm in this place for the rest of my life? Would I be okay with that? Would I be joyful? Would I be content? And I feel like that coming to that place is like when things start to almost magnetize towards you because you're detached from the expectation of the next thing or also even the lack, right? Because that's where the energy is coming from. You're coming from a place of lack, like, oh, I'm not there, or oh, my life doesn't look like this. That is all lack. And if you're so focused on that, you're not magnetizing, you're not attracting, you're not calling in the things that you truly desire. And it's that shift in energy that I feel like I've never had that conversation like with people. That's just never been something that I've understood or people have talked about. And I wish I knew when I was, 5 years ago, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree
Because
with
I've
you.
spent a lot of time just thinking about what I don't have, where I'm not, and this and that.
This and that. Yeah. And I think with social media, it's not the easiest as well, right? Like there's such a comparison culture and it's almost like a prerequisite that every creator takes where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you have to do better than this and you have to hop on this trend and this and that. But I think that the more you can actually take a step back and just look at the bigger picture and look at how
Mm,
good you actually have it and how far you've actually made it, you'd be like, I'm good here. It's fine. And then things work themselves out even better
yeah.
than you had expected, which is beautiful. But it's not because you're forcing and trying to think your way through it. You're just feeling your way through it. And like that's such a more like fulfilling journey, in my opinion.
Mm,
I feel like with a lot of people, it takes time to get to that point. So you saying the 5 years, me saying the 3.5, 4 years, I think like it's because we've overcome a lot of it. We've done the work, not just growing the business, but also like overcoming like the mental aspect of
mm,
entrepreneurship, right? Like the emotional and the spiritual aspect of it all as well, because it does transform you. You are the
mm.
same person, but you are such a different person at the same time. So I
Yeah.
don't think we would even be saying the words we're saying 4 or 5 years ago, the stuff that we're talking about right now, because it's something that I don't think we'd even be able to fathom, right?
So true. So true. And I feel like I don't know why this came through too is like sometimes you talked about the mental and the emotional and the spiritual is like I think sometimes also along the way and along the journey you're not necessarily so focused on every single one of those aspects and sometimes you're more so leaning into developing who you are spiritually and then other times you are really overcoming that mental battle that's happening or the emotional and sometimes you're just going to be so focused in on a certain area. I was just thinking about that as you kind of were sharing that, but also another thing that I was thinking about and I wanted to kind of ask you because you talk about comparison and I feel like this probably shows up a lot in working with your clients. The comparison with like other people are doing this, other people are doing the same thing, and how do I stand out? And I feel like that is such a challenging. Whenever I'm like working with someone and they're like, "Okay, what makes you unique?" I'm like, please don't ask me this question. Like it's such a hard thing to articulate, but yeah, I'm just curious on like your thoughts on, maybe it's from your own journey and your own perspective of like how have you found your kind of like place to stand out and how do you guide clients and the people that you work with to be able to find that for themselves too.
Yeah. Um, I think the biggest thing is just finding ways to remind yourself that I just want to be more me today. I just want to be more me
Mm,
today. A lot of people I work with are solopreneurs or the face of their business. So it is not like a big brand, it's more of like a one-on-one connection type of brand. So coaches and therapists and facilitators. So I work with people like that. So I think it's really, really important to have like really strong values and remind yourself that these values are not my values because they sound good or because they fit an aesthetic.
mm,
They are my values because without this, my business doesn't exist. Without this, I don't exist. So the more I can embody these values every single day in every aspect, whether that is the way you respond to your emails or the color palette you're using, like it should show up in every single thing about your brand, right? And the more you can do that. I think branding is not just slapping a logo on something. I think it's a daily practice of just being more yourself and embodying those values. And as you practice it, it just becomes easier. And then that's what you're known for, right?
yeah.
If you think about like the creators or speakers or celebrities, anyone who has like the signature thing, it's not because they have a specific logo or they have a specific thing that they tried forcing. No, that's just who they are. And then they just came to know as that, right?
Mm, yeah, it's definitely the extension piece, right? Like this extension of who we are. But I think you said something key is that it's a daily practice, and it's like that muscle, right? Like you're literally actively training this muscle of for yourself to be able to kind of show up more and more authentically in who you are and it just gets to be an extension and I feel like gets to be is a really big key here, because people try to kind of form. And that's why I say too, it's like very important to have some sort of practice where you're connecting back to yourself daily. That has been really key for me over the last year. And I'm curious, like, your own perspective on like what keeps you grounded in this is who I am, because with social media and just being so inundated with information, with people, with mentors. And I'm not saying it's a negative thing to have mentors. It is the most beautiful thing. It's about cultivating this relationship where you can take whoever it is that you are working with and their guidance, and also have this practice where you check back in with yourself and ask yourself the truth of, how does this feel for me right now? If especially early on in business, I remember my first coach that I worked with, and I ended up working with her again, but it felt so differently from when I was like just starting out. It's like, well, this is the plan, this is the strategy that she's laid out, I have to follow it to a T.
Yeah.
Whereas later on, and now being several years later, I'm like, okay, I know that this is the suggestion here, but this is what is really feeling good for me right now. And that practice to come back to your truth, what feels good for you. And I feel like that question we don't ask ourselves enough, and that has changed everything for me in the last year, and has allowed me to really build this trust, and to be able to make decisions and also become more creative, because I'm
Yeah.
actually listening to myself, and I'm not like, okay, what's happening over here? What's happening over here? Like, it just feels very true, because it feels like it's coming from me. And not rushing that process is such a big thing too, where I'm like getting pieces of clarity and then it comes together and it's so fun. But what's like your practice? Like, what does that look like for you to be able to kind of stay true to who you are in, no matter what that looks like, or no matter what day? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like realizing that you need to validate yourself. Like the validation you can give yourself
Mm,
is like the best thing for yourself, right? Um,
mm,
but a lot of us are conditioned to not remember that. So
yeah.
we seek that from the outside world, whether that is, like you said, mentors or our customers or even social media and the metrics. And we think that, oh, this video didn't do well, or this piece of content didn't do well. So that means like my branding isn't good, or
Mm,
the way I'm speaking or showing up isn't good. But that's not really the truth, right? Like the metrics can be wrong, the algorithm can be wrong. And most of the time it is. So I think number one is like detaching from the external, which is the hardest thing for most people. If you can actually take, again, another step back and just realize like all of that is a distraction, all of that is
mm,
forcing you to think. But as humans, we're not really designed to think our way to our purpose. We're designed to feel our way to our purpose, right? So what you said with like, how do I feel is a way better question. So do I feel
mm,
high energy today? Okay, if you feel high energy today, great. Like take advantage of that. Go do this, this, and this, because more of you is going to show up into that, right? But if you check in with yourself and you're like, you know what, I'm not really feeling the most like dandy today. Okay, I'm just gonna do some admin work and then I'm just gonna go for a walk. So
mm,
setting those boundaries is really really important too. So those are like that's the second thing. So the first thing is taking consideration of the external, remembering that it is a distraction. Number two is setting boundaries. So that automatically puts me into a space where I'm like, okay, now it's time to focus on myself. How I focus on myself is mostly yoga. I do go to yoga almost every day. And then recently I went to a Vipassana meditation course. I'm not sure if you've heard of
I have. Yeah.
and that was a beautiful experience. So that's like the most, I think, beneficial thing that I've felt personally. And I'm not trying to sell it,
Yeah.
but it was such an incredible experience, and it just taught me to how I can come back to myself, how I can come home to
Mm,
myself, and it's like an hour or two a day. I just sit with myself, and there's no other voices in my head. When I start off that meditation, there's so many voices, so many opinions, so many things to do. And then by the time I get up, all I can hear is like the birds chirping around me. And I'm like, this is the clarity I needed, and I can't get it anywhere
Yeah.
else. No amount of coach or mentor that can give that to me. It's just like tapping into like my own wisdom that I get that from, right? So that is my practice. That's kind of what I do and what I lean into, but I'm sure that can also change
Mm.
a month from now. Um,
Yeah.
that's completely okay too. We have to be open to that, right?
Yeah. You I'm so grateful for you sharing those pieces, because I resonate. It looks so different to every single person, but I yeah, it's just having this intentional time is the way I look at like just being grounded. It's the
Yeah.
intentional time that you set for yourself, and
And that's a business
that could
task.
be, yeah, that's so true, right? Like have that, we talk about like, okay, checking things off the to-do list. Well, if you're in that space and that feels really good for you, then put that on the to-do list, and
Mhm.
that, I feel like whether it's an hour or two, and maybe some people are like, I don't have an hour, I don't have two, being so focused for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes is enough. It's
Mhm.
enough. Like I promise you, sometimes I kind of rush through and I just have like 5 minutes. But those 5 minutes are so intentional. And that's the thing, that is the most important thing, is being so intentional about the time that you spent, and how you're spending that time. It's not about what you do, because
Yeah.
you could have the whole morning routine that is so rigid, and you're like, okay, I went to the gym, and then I read a book, and then I did my meditation, and you're checking off all these things. And then at the end of it, you're just like, I don't feel more connected to myself, because it was just
Mhm.
checking things off the list, right? And it's just like allowing yourself to really like hone in and be really intentional with that space that you're creating, and stop looking at like the routines that people have set. If that doesn't feel good for you, like don't include that. Like that, there's no perfect routine, there truly isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like one of the biggest things I realized was that's the luxury. The luxury isn't the nice cars, the nice home, the nice meals, going out
Mm,
all the time and partying. It's not that. The luxury is being able to, for me, being able to tend to my garden or going on a walk with my dog and just sitting outside in the morning and enjoying my cup of coffee without like rushing out in the morning. Like for me, that's luxury. So just redefining what success means to you is so important. And I think again a lot of people are just trying to replicate the success that they see, whether online or whether in magazines or whatever that might be. But if you just come home to yourself, you realize like having, again, whatever it is for you, whether it is crocheting, whether it is being able to solo travel, like whatever that might be for you, but just redefining what success is for you will just make finding that hour in the day so much more easier. Figuring out like
mhm.
what it is that you need to do to like calm yourself down or cope with the other challenges in your life is just going to become something that is almost like a non-negotiable, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was last year, or maybe it was the year before that. I was working with a coach, and she was like the first person that really made me think about that question of like, what is success to me?
Mhm.
And it was this first time where I wasn't thinking about what other people told me is success, and I feel like, I think I'm just vulnerable to taking on ideas. Well, human design, so I
I
love
was just
human
gonna
design as well.
okay.
So I have like fully open head, open ajna, and like I see the influence that happens,
Mhm.
and yeah, I've just like been very mindful of what I take on, and so I really started to sit with that question for the first time, and I was like, wait a second, it actually doesn't feel good to like focus on this like $1 million brand business. I was like, oh, that doesn't even feel good for me. And that was just portrayed from other coaches, beautiful coaches and mentors. It
Yeah.
just like wasn't where I was at all. And I feel like that's sometimes this disconnect is being actually truly honest with where you're at in your life right now. And that's been such a big piece for me. And again, thankfully I have, without knowing, people have said certain things that have just allowed me to be like, oh, I can breathe a little bit because,
Mhm.
as I'm in the midst of planning a wedding and I'm also have my business, I'm working full time, like there's a lot going on. And while I'm not stressed and feeling super grounded, I'm also just like, what's my capacity right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Truly, what's my capacity? And I feel like sometimes that's a disconnect, right? We're like, I want to do all the things. I want to do it all. And we're like, okay, but what's it's not about realistic, but what's my capacity right now? Like that
Yeah.
question is just allows you to actually again be super intentional about your time. I've always been that type of person that just like I'll like make a list of 10 goals and then I get overwhelmed and I'm like, nothing happens. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here. Yeah. Just like set this like unrealistic list of things to get done by this unrealistic deadline. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And I'm like, wait a second. Nobody is making me do this. Like it's just me forcing myself to be this like ridiculous person, right? So I think
Hmm.
that's so important, like to just take care of our own selves as well and make that a priority, make that a non-negotiable. Because again, when your cup is not full, you can't serve others, and that is again
Hmm.
something I try to come back to every single day. I'm a projector, so for me, it's
Oh, are
like
you?
yes, so it's I'm always just like, oh, everyone's just in the rat race. Let me just follow along, and then I burn out so quick. So
You know
I
what's
have
funny is when you were talking about burnout earlier, I was like, I wonder. I got this like feel. I was like, I wonder if she's a projector. Again, not to label, but I just got this like sense. I was like, I feel like she's a projector.
no, hardcore projector, and
Yeah.
burnt out a lot of times. But I learned my lesson, and that's why I'm trying to be more intentional with like how I show up in my business. I'm a very like type A organized person as well, so um, for me, I need to see progress every single day. But
Mm,
then I became very like metrics oriented, and that's
yeah.
okay for some people. But again, that's not where I was. So I had to really come back to
Okay.
myself and be like, this is not good for you. And if you keep operating your business this way, yes, maybe other people are doing it and it's wonderful for them and they found success. If you keep doing it, it's gonna burn down. Like just take a step back, take
Mm-hmm.
a step back. So I think a lot of us struggle with just listening to the wrong advice and also have an open head and open ajna. So
Yeah.
um, it's so easy to just like lean in and follow along, but you have to remember like if it doesn't feel good, it's not going to work out, right? No matter how much
Yeah.
you force, no matter how much you try to think your way towards it. So
Mm.
it's the harsh truth. It is the harsh truth.
It 100%, 100%. I think, and that it's coming back to, and we're not taught to tune into how we're feeling. We're taught to like, what do we ask? Like, honestly, genuinely, if you sit and think about conversations that you have with people, oftentimes you'll ask someone, hey, what do you think about this? And that's always the question that we're asking each other. And then we're asking ourselves, like, what do I think about this? Like, how am I going to do this? It's all mental pressure that's happening up here. And I've become just, again, so intentional with language and the questions that I ask myself. Like, okay, what feels really good right now? Like, if you can
Mhm.
ask yourself that question on a daily basis, I think I can promise you that you're gonna see your own type of success. And I feel like, for you knowing that your like area of alignment, you're gonna feel success. It's like redefining what does success look like. Like
Mhm.
success today, it was like I took care of myself. Like I feel good about that. It's like constantly moving and letting how we're feeling guide the way versus what do I think about this? what,
Yes.
like, how am I going to do this?
Mhm.
And it just takes up so much space, unnecessary space, when we are constantly in that. And it truly is a practice. It's a practice to, like, kind of get out of your head and get into your body, kind of thing. And I know it just sounds cliche because people talk about it all the time, but there's so much truth to it. Like, there's so much truth when you can get out of your head. You know, when I feel that, like, mental pressure coming in and I'm just starting to overthink, and I can feel it. I start to get a headache, and I'm just, my wheels are spinning, and I
Mhm.
just step away. And it happened the other day. I was like in this, when you're kind of just like, I've got all the energy and you're like writing out all your goals. I was like, okay, I'm planning like the rest of my year. And I was like, whoa, okay, we've got a lot on here. We got a lot here. And I was like, okay, let me step away from this, because I started to feel the overwhelm. And I took a shower, and immediately, like
Mhm.
instantly, it was like, this one goal that I was going to take a lot was just not the priority this year. And I was like, that feels good. That feels really good. That feels true. I can do that like that. I can do that one next year. That feels
Mhm.
good. And you just like remove it. And again, it's this constant checking in with yourself. And that was one thing that was kind of coming through as you were sharing too, is constantly checking in with yourself, like daily,
Yes.
weekly, setting
Yeah.
up that practice. Because of course you're going to set these goals, right? Whatever that looks like for you. You're going to set the yearly goal, and then maybe you'll set them quarterly, and then you're going to look at it monthly, like, right? Like, we're kind of, there's a space for that. And I think no matter what, weekly, daily, checking in with yourself. Like,
Mhm.
does this goal still feel good? And if not, don't be afraid to let it go.
Yeah.
Like,
If it's
just
meant to
don't.
be, it will come back and there will be time for it. But don't
Exactly.
don't force it, because you're gonna force it and it's just not gonna translate well. I anyway, because it's not coming from a good place or the right intention. So it's actually you're doing it a better service by just letting it go.
Amen.
But also, yeah, also on the point about like just taking a step back, I think that's something we keep coming back to, and that's I think amazing. But it's something that I'm sure took you a long time to understand as well. Like, oh, how can I tune into my body? Oh, my body's trying to give me signals, because I'm sure, like, because for me, like, I
Mm-hmm.
was completely ignoring my body. I was
Same.
completely ignoring all the signals I was getting, whether that was physical or mental or whatever it was. And I think a lot of the times that's why it sounds like, oh, it's so easier said than done, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
can say, like, take a step back, but not everyone can take a step back. Not everybody knows what that means for them. They have to
Yeah.
figure that out themselves. And for me, how it happened was I was like, oh, I want to make a lot of money in my business. I want to make a lot of money in my business. And the last year, I was making a lot of money in my business, but I was running out first thing in the morning. I was coming home late. I was out all day, barely got to, like, nurture my
Mm.
relationships, barely got to see my dogs. I had no hobbies whatsoever. I didn't get to go to the gym or yoga or meditate, like nothing, right? So all the other things in my life were just put on hold because I wanted this one thing, and now I was getting this one thing, right? And when I was like
Mm-hmm.
on the verge of burnout, I was like, wait a second, like, why do I want this? Why do I want to make a lot of money? Is that even success to me? Do I really want that? Or would I rather be happier enjoying my cup of coffee in the morning, sitting on my porch instead of in the car and it's like spilling on me when I'm like taking a left turn? Do I really want to do that? I think for everybody, like, you just arrive to it in your own way, and I just want to like pinpoint that because it is easier said than done. But
Million
just
percent.
because we're saying it doesn't mean that like we didn't have our hardships, we didn't um, face our reality, and then come to the realization that this is not going to cut it anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to
Yeah.
pinpoint. Yeah.
No, I think it's so true. To me, I mean, for like, human design was such a big area for me that I genuinely had no trust in myself. Like, I mean, there was definitely like, it almost like, when it kind of feels like, oh, you like sprinkle it and you kind of feel it and see it sometimes, where you're like, I trust myself, and I know this. It was not very evident for me. And I'm a Manny Gen with a sacral authority. So when I learned about human design, I my mind was blown. And just this understanding and actively playing with it, actively cultivating this relationship. I had my first human design reading at the end of 2020. We're
Mhm.
now in almost like 3.5 years later.
Yes.
And now I'm in again, like it was, I started to see it right away, but it's been funny enough, just so evident of how much I've cultivated this trust with myself. Even through funny enough, like wedding planning, right? Like I use this example. I'm sure this is not the first time I've said it, but I've spoken to people who go and see like 20 plus venues. I'm like, I saw three and I knew right away. Like, I saw three and I knew. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like this trust. Um, yeah, like you play with it. And I'm glad that you said that too, because I think that's important to highlight is that it is, am I going to trust myself every single day? No, that is
Mhm.
definitely not the truth at all. I waver, I dance just yesterday. So it's funny when you were saying, I'm like, just yesterday, I was like, what am I doing with my life and my business? Like, everything just doesn't make sense. I suck and all this, right? Like, it's like this dance. And I was like, okay, Ashley, I'm hungry. Like, I'm just gonna go eat. Like, I need to
Yeah.
nourish myself in this moment, right? Like, I'm like, okay, is this actually true right now in this moment? I was like, nah, we're just having a moment, right? And I think like that was something too that was, I think it's important to highlight is like not shaming yourself, not judging yourself when these moments arise, because these moments are gonna arise. Like
Yeah. Of course. It's part of the
they're
journey.
unavoidable, right? Like they're unavoidable. You are growing. You are likely creating a path that no one has walked, right? Like yes, there are mentors. Yes, there are people who have built successful businesses, but no matter what, I feel like in any sense, you're still creating your own path, right? Like you're creating it yourself. No one's walked it before. So
Mhm.
it's not going to be easy. It's going to be challenging, and there's constantly going to be challenges. And that knowing that you're so capable of being able to face all of those challenges, knowing so wholeheartedly that you have exactly what it takes to be able to cross every bridge that comes your way, is such a big reminder. It's like, all right, this is just a moment. I'm not going to shame myself. I'm not going to judge myself. Um, yeah, like that's a big piece too, is it's not perfect. I've spiraled so many times, and I've spent so much time in those like negative downward spirals. And I feel like the more that you actively, like it's such a conscious effort, right? Like one thing that I really struggled with was like negative self-talk when I was
Mhm.
in, high school and just younger for a very long time. And the way that I was able to, not that it's perfect, but the way that that period of time, the length of time that I spend in that spiral of negative self-talk has shortened. And it's such a conscious process. Like you have to be so aware of when it's happening so
Yes.
that you can course correct. And I feel like that comes back to your piece around what you were saying is like validating yourself. Like building this, whatever that looks like validating yourself in that moment and literally shifting the conversation and the narrative that you're having. It sometimes sounds a little crazy, but I mean, because it's all happening in your head, you're like, okay, this is but I'm this, I know I'm this. Like it's so
Yeah.
wild, but it's so true, right?
No, it is. I always say I have to mom myself because that's like the
Yeah,
best way I can explain it.
I love that.
Uh,
Yeah.
I have to literally talk to myself. And I've tried explaining it to a couple of people and they look at me a little crazy, but I'm like, that's the best way I can explain it, where it's like
Yeah.
you literally have to sit with yourself, whether you're doing it through journaling, whether you're doing it through meditation, whether you're doing it through a walk, like whatever it is, but it's just like a moment to yourself where you're like, okay, yes, you're saying XYZ about me, but is that even true? Where's the proof?
Hmm.
Where's the proof? Or is this coming from fear? And it's just like you almost like undo the spiral and then you come back to the top, right? And that is a skill that needs a lot of work, a lot of time spent with yourself. But what a lot of people do is they actually run away. So they'll go on their phone,
Hmm.
they'll go scroll, they'll go call a friend and tell them all their problems. So it's very interesting how people cope, but the best way to cope is actually to just like tap into yourself and just mom yourself a little bit sometimes.
That piece around the avoidance of what's coming up and scrolling. And also, I love that you said talking to somebody else about it is, it seems like it's such a healthy habit. And of course, there's like a time and place for it too. But
Mhm.
what's even better and what's even more healthy is if you can just have that dialogue with yourself, right?
Yes.
Like it cultivates this practice, right? It's about your own internal wisdom. And that's what I feel like we're constantly straying away from. We're finding
Mhm.
like we're either just suppressing ourselves from being able to tap into it and access it by having the conversations, seeking advice and guidance from other people, whether it be a mentor, your mother, your sister, it doesn't matter who it is.
Mhm.
But constantly going out and the avoidance of things, eventually, I it's just one thing that, like, again, we have to learn on the journey, is that being able to like just be able to transform something is not about avoidance. It's not about avoidance, and it's going to come up again, I promise. And it probably is going to continue to come up until you truly like really work with it. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? It's not about like eradicating it, or being able to just like, okay, get rid of this. Like, I don't want this, and
Yeah.
not seeing it, because you can't just not see it either. That doesn't do anything.
No, that's so true. That's so true. If anything, it's going to come back stronger and bother you more. So, isn't it better to
Hmm.
just deal with it or befriend it to a point where it's like, okay, you again, let's talk.
Yeah.
And then it passes and then you're like, okay, I feel better. So, that
Hmm.
that is something that takes time as well, but it's like it's not something we're conditioned to do, you know. I personally learned this through reading the book The Mountain Is You. I'm not sure if you read it before, but
I
it is
started reading it.
beautifully written. For me, beautifully written. It just really resonated with me. But um, it just said like, you know, you might feel like you are scared to sit in the passenger seat, and that's why you don't sit in the car. That's why you don't travel by a car because you just feel scared to sit in the passenger seat. But mm, it's not the fact that you're scared to sit in a car. You're probably just scared of not having control of the car. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
interesting, right? Because that applies in so many
Mm.
situations. And that's when I was like, okay, I have to just like start talking to myself. And I don't care how crazy that sounds. I don't care how crazy
Yeah.
that sounds because it's like if I don't do it for myself, then I'm going to rely on other people to do it for me. And I don't think anybody can solve my problems the best, like as best as I can, right? And
Hmm.
if it's a skill that I can hone in on, then that's a skill that I
Yeah.
can pass on to other generations as well. So it's I know we're like completely like steering away from the conversation, but I think like it does come back to entrepreneurship too, right? If your decision making gets better, the way you talk
Hmm.
to clients gets better, the way you take yourself seriously gets better. Like I used to send
Yes.
emails before and I would be like, oh my gosh, like are they gonna respond? Do they want to work with me? And I just sit there for 4 hours overthinking and I'm like, okay, enough's enough. Now I send out an
Yep.
email, scary email, close the laptop, and we're on a walk. Like it's just that's how it is. Because I'm not even gonna give
Hmm.
myself a chance to sit there and just go down the spiral. It's not gonna happen, right?
Yeah. And that's, I think, ultimately, so like it does. Like, I know we're kind of talking about this inward journey, but that is truly such a big piece. That's, I think, such a big theme that's come out recently, is how much I've learned that the more grounded I am in myself, and the more that I communicate with myself, and the more that I trust and I listen, um, to myself. It's this, however you want to look at it and think of it, having the conversation with your higher self, like whatever that looks like for you, but it comes down to coming back to your own internal compass.
Yes.
And you know what's better for you. You know
Mm,
what's best for you.
yes.
It's We've just been taught to believe that we don't, right?
Mm.
Like, something's wrong, you go to the doctor. And there's nothing wrong with going to the doctor. I'm not saying that. It's just it's like, yourself too, right? Like, you truly, when you create the space to have that relationship with yourself. And that's ultimately what this is. It's about creating a relationship with yourself so that you can trust yourself, so that you can hear yourself. And
Mhm.
ultimately, what happens is you become a better entrepreneur, a better human being.
Mhm.
And that automatically, like the end result, you serve people better. You show up for people better. You show up for yourself better, you know?
Mhm.
And like you said, you become, the way that I thought about it was like detached, right? Like I resonate so much with the whole like spending like and constantly checking your email, waiting for the response. Like, oh my God, do they accept? Do they want to work with me? And now it's just like, meh, here we go.
Mhm.
Like, you know, it's like feeling more and more detached, but it's such a conscious, like it's such a process. And it's
Mhm.
not going to happen overnight. And it won't happen at all if you're constantly avoiding and running and
Yes.
escaping, right? Like it's and that escaping piece is such a big thing too. It's like, why are you trying to escape your own reality right now? And
I
if that
know.
is the case, like it's an opportunity to reflect on like, what are you trying to escape? Like what are you trying to run away from? And being able to like call, again, coming back to that piece that we were talking about, is like, all you have is right now, is this moment. That's all.
Mhm.
That's all you have, is this moment right now. And we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this, I feel like so like energized from this conversation and everything, every place that we went, every like crevice that we kind of like dove into. Um, but I'd love for you to share too, first and foremost, where can people connect with you? And then I'll ask you like one final question. But what do you have going on? If people are resonating and landing and want to work with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is through Instagram. It's sucheta.khurana. Um, and if you want to reach out to me personally and just have a chat, grab a virtual coffee, my email is sucheta.khurana@gmail.com. I'm very simple, very easy to reach out to. Don't worry about it. I think more than I love the work I do, but more than just like helping people with branding, I just love connecting with people. I just love
Mhm.
having conversations like this. So if you did resonate with this and you just want to dive into similar topics, I would love to nerd out with you. I would love to nerd out with people about human design as well. So reach
Yeah.
out if you feel called to. Yeah.
I love that so much. And I mean, that's naturally also too how we connected. I felt that immediately connecting with you. So, I mean, and also too, if there's anything that really resonated with you, I mean, whether it's connecting with myself and just like, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to like hear something that really landed for you. So please, don't hesitate to like share that for those that are tuning in. And my final thing that I want to ask you is if you could kind of like put all your like life's wisdom up until this point, right? Up until this point, into like a single piece of advice, not a single word, but like a piece of advice to leave with those that are tuning in and listening, what would it be?
I would say, I don't know how to word it. I know exactly what I want to say, but I'd say be the representation you didn't have growing up,
Mm,
because there's nobody else who can represent you the way you can. So every single day, try to just practice being more you, whether that is checking in with yourself or validating yourself or redefining your success, whatever that is. But just every single day, take one more step towards being more you.
I love that so much. And I'm so grateful to you and for this conversation and, you know, every place that we went. I love that piece of advice and that constant check-in and reminder. And again, I'm so grateful and honored to have held space with you and just be in conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.